Hi Legionnaires, welcome back to another video. I hope you're all doing well and you've had a good week. We recently started this series on Metaurus from Secret Level, and Games Workshop sent me the box set for the Wardens of Ultramar. And obviously the character that Metaurus is, I absolutely had to paint him. I wanted to show you guys through how to do the gold. Now, I've done gold a few times, so this tutorial won't be like specifically how to paint gold, but more again how to think about it in terms of like placement. So in front of me I've got this reference from Pinterest, and there's some great resources on Pinterest for all sorts of things of how to think of it. Now, I actually didn't use this reference when I began painting. I kind of just looked at the artwork, but I thought this would be a really nice way of showing you what to kind of consider and look at. So in this first, let's look at the third image, or the second one from on the left, in the middle. So this one, you can see where the colors have been placed, right? You've got at the bottom like a deep orangey brown, and then you've got this kind of desaturated gray gold, and then in the middle you've got this large band of light, right? And then it repeats itself before we get a rebound. And note that on the one just above, between the kind of desaturated and the brown, there's another like kind of light color, this kind of rebounding color. And these things are really interesting because when we come to paint the trim, we'll be needing to think about the colors in the same way, and especially the direction of the brush. Gold and NMM in general isn't too difficult once you understand that the material is essentially a mirror. So if you see anything, any kind of light band, anything where the light hits is what will be in light, and then anything next to it will be pretty much in shadow unless there's a rebounding object hitting it again. So that should make things like blades, shoulder pads, any kind of shape, once you understand, pretty simple. Now of course it's not that simple. When you actually get to painting it on a miniature, it gets quite complex. So doing things in kind of these like bite-sized settings or bite-sized tasks is really helpful to get you into a position where you feel a bit more confident before you tackle on like larger projects. So I'd like to build towards painting that custody that I mentioned at the end of that video. Towards the end of the year, we'll be doing that in full NMM Gold, which I've never done before, by the way. So this is all for me as well, to kind of practice to get to those points. It doesn't really matter if you do this in acrylic or oils. All that matters is the direction of your brush stroke. So see how it's kind of going across the shape. It's not going up and traveling up the length of the shape, it's kind of going through the width. And that's once I found doing that, it actually makes the shapes look a lot more metallic and interesting. Then you can see that it's kind of been blended in between the two, in between each area. It's been blended, smoothed out, and then you get a little bit more refinement of a few more brush strokes across the surface before finally that you get this white beam in the center. And that beam in the center gives us the idea of like a bright light shining on it. Now Metaurus's armor is the kind of setting I've got for this again is in orange, right? So it's orange sunlight or sunset. So their values won't be as bright, but depending on where the light's hitting from, but will be a lot more saturation. So I really wanted that in his armor to kind of enjoy as well. The edge highlights are really important here, but you can just stipple these textures on. You don't have to do large bands if you don't want to. You can do all sorts of things, and I think actually stippling is a little bit more interesting because it makes the gold seem more like scratched and, well, just more realistic in my opinion. So anyway, let's get on to the video. You can see in the screenshot that I've got here, it's kind of following the same pattern with the bands of light across Metaurus's shoulders, and then everything else is in dark. So you don't need to render too much. You just need to do some kind of rebound lights for it to be convincing, and then you've got the blends and the colors you want. So let's get into the video, and I'll walk through the rest of the process. So here are the colours I've got in front of me, and you'll see these colours a lot. You'll see them for the other videos that I'm going to be doing on gold, for the white gold, with a different variation. And these colours are excellent. So you've got burnt umber, which is like a deep cold brown, and then you've got dark ochre from Onyx. The Onyx range is fantastic, guys. Absolutely get this if you can. And then you've also got yellow ochre. So I'll walk through. I've split these up into little sections. And what I did is that I primed these areas black, and then I did a layer of the burnt umber, which you're seeing now. And I'm just going to do a repeated layer just to kind of make it fully opaque. And this was 2 layers. I did about 2 layers of this over different elements of the armor, you know, just taking my time. This isn't going to be a super long video, so I'm happy to kind of like slow the footage down and let you guys see every element. The key part is just being as neat as possible. I've just decided that even the kind of stomach area where his what's it called, where his cloth is going to be a similar color. And so this should give you guys all the kind of details and guides that you need around how to paint gold. And the most focused thing I'm thinking of is just getting this base coat in and done in a really nice way. And then I occasionally mix in a tiny bit of the dark ochre onto the armor as well, and onto the cloth, as you can see here. And this is just to give me an opaque layer. Now, when I was painting this, all I was thinking about was just how much fun it's actually been. It was really nice. I think I was just motivated by the model itself. Metaurus is like, I think, the 2nd Black Space Marine to ever get a model, with Farron being the first, and obviously we'll be painting Farron much later on. But I just enjoyed it, so I was really like rushing to do this. Now, the calligraphy, or rather the wings on the chest, this is actually quite tricky. I made a mistake, and you'll see me paint this completely wrong through the beginning of the tutorial, and then I come back later and correct it. But essentially, the mistake I'm making is that I treated the wings like separate volumes. So the band of wings, if you imagine that they are light travels in a straight line, I had it separated. So on the edge of the rings I would do some highlights, and then on the opposite side again I would do highlights in the same place, but further away from the center where the light would actually be traveling, not like I've been doing with the bands of the trim that I'm doing now. So you can see here, what I've done is I've mixed in just a tiny bit more yellow ochre, and because I'm taking my time with this and letting it kind of dry, you can actually start to see it really kind of reveal itself. And the cool thing about this is that with acrylics is, obviously, when you apply them, they don't look as when they do when they're applied. So what you end up getting is a slightly lighter version of the same color. But you can see me here, I'm just kind of looking back up and down at my reference, just trying to make sense of what I'm looking at. And when I paint an area, I don't just go over it straight away. I move to another area and then come back to it once it's dried. And so we're just gradually building up the volume here, and you can see I'm just kind of staying in the same place, following the light, which is determined by what we did with the shoulder pads earlier. So you can see the light on the shoulder pads, how it's kind of gone to this kind of desaturated orangey peachy tone that we did previously. We're kind of repeating that now by following the same, using that as a guide to follow the same area of the actual cloth itself. So this can be really simple and really quite easy, so long as you take your time and you're just kind of following the lights. It goes down and across, so there will be a gap where it kind of points towards the ground, and that can be in shadow because there's not really much for it to reflect. The distance is just too great. So yeah, at the top here is where you'll get majority of the light. So you can see me now, I've started to increase the amount of yellow. And what this is doing in slightly a bit of yellow ochre is that it starts to kind of instantly warm up. Now you don't need a lot of this because you can see that it's interesting, right? Because like sometimes you can go really quick and go too far, and then there's a point where the armor doesn't really look gold anymore, it looks yellow. So the way to determine if something is metallic is by how thin and how pinched the light is on the surface. So if it's really condensed and tight, it will start to appear a bit more shiny. If it's really broad, it will start to appear a bit more either matte or not like a metallic surface. So I do enjoy just like adding in these tones and then just letting it, just waiting to see what kind of happens here. So here you guys, you can see like the armor there starting to kind of, you know, we're starting to get to that point, and you can even argue maybe this is like a dull metallic already just by the tones, but we need to push the values higher. The key thing though is to be neat. Like I used to rush through this so much, guys. I used to kind of like speed through each element far too quickly, and I've just zoomed in a little bit, far too quickly, and it would end up resulting in me kind of like, oh, there's a baby crying in the background, my son. Hold on. Shut that door. And I used to actually spend a lot of time just trying to, you know, get the colours in place, not really worried about the neatness. And now I feel like I'm finally getting to a point where, you know, the atmospherics are starting to matter so much more. And that's just because we've gotten better with our brush control. Now, obviously, I know I've been painting in acrylics a lot. There will be a project where I'll kind of go back to just oil paints to show you that this is all possible just in oils. And I think it will be really beneficial for many of you guys who still don't know maybe where you stand with oils versus acrylics. But you know, they're just two different mediums. They're excellent. They just need to be worked up slightly differently. So yeah, but there's nothing to be worried about. I've not abandoned oil paints at all. I just use them a little bit more tactically. So here, yeah, just continuing the same process, getting that kind of smaller as I kind of work in the middle, and just using the vibrancy of when I first apply it as my guide for what I want the color to look like. Now the ionics are quite, I'll say they're kind of more satin, matte satin. They're kind of like in between the two. They're not super matte like AK or Chimera, but they sit somewhere in between, and they're quite nice. They kind of dry in a really nice way, especially their yellow. So you can see me now just adding in those tones to the same place, getting gradually smaller. And once you guys establish where your light source is coming from, this really does become the same. It's just the same kind of idea repeated again and again. So you can actually see that I've added ice yellow from Ionics in there, and you can start to see the tone really come in to fruition. Forgive me for my crappy filming skills here. You can see me just starting to like really get into those areas now and start making the marks. And this is where we start to build the highlights now. So we're really starting to kind of establish the zones and locations of where these areas are going to kind of exist. And it can take a little while, but just kind of follow the same line. And so here you can see, like, yeah, we're just kind of continuing on, and this is where I start to make a little bit of a mistake. You can see the light is kind of spread out on the chest too far. You've got like, it kind of goes dark light when it really should be going dark light dark, in that kind of pattern like we saw on the band that I showed you earlier, similar to what we've been doing on the actual trim. It's just a mental thing that you need to kind of get used to. It's not intuitive actually, but once you remember that light again only travels in a straight line, it will start to make a lot more sense to you. So once you add in that ice yellow to your yellow ochre, you won't need a lot of it, by the way, just maybe like a little, maybe 1 part ice yellow to 2 parts yellow ochre. Once you add that into this mixture, it will start to kind of appear a bit more gold and definitely brighter. Now you've got 2 ways of working. On this trim, I worked kind of down along at the time, but now I would say it's actually better to work across. So like I mentioned in the reference before, work across the shape, don't work kind of along it, if that makes sense, because then it will start to just look a lot more metallic and shiny, based on where your brushstroke is facing and the direction it's going in. But I've got to say, yeah, actually, like painting this, I I was actually originally I was going to take Ferren to MPO, but I think I'll be doing him either for like prepared for next year or for GD. I don't know. If I end up going to GD, I'd like to take a Ferren, but we'll see. I think we can really push Metaurus further. Maybe I take him to GD instead. I really don't know. I think here we go, here's the light coming in now. I think that I don't know, I just find Ferren's pose so boring. That is, like, for me, that is the only issue with him. I actually think the design of the model itself is really nice, like the way he's modeled and kitted, by his pose. I know he's the master of signals, but I don't know. I've never really liked characters that kind of just stand there. But despite saying this, the cover of his artwork is actually fantastic. I really love that cover. So I'd actually just preferred if they just did that model instead. But yeah, never mind. It's kind of the same with Titus. It's why I didn't really do Titus straight away. I don't find him that interesting. So yeah, that's why I didn't kind of jump on Titus. He might be a model that I do much later on, but I'm not in a rush again before him. I've got so much other stuff to paint, so maybe he's something I do much later down the line. But you can start to see, yeah, I'm just highlighting the same areas, bringing up the light to those points to make it look just a little bit more shiny. And we're starting to get there, aren't we? Like, we're starting to get to that point of where it's starting to look quite metallic and shiny. I will say though, there's still quite a little bit to do. We still haven't got the kind of temperature changes in yet, but you can see how that's all starting to kind of have an effect. And there I'm just starting to get in my little highlights, my first highlights, edge highlights, to these locations. And I'm kind of using a stippling motion just because I like the kind of look it starts to have. And this is where acrylics excel, just making texture Oils are good. You can obviously make texture of oils, absolutely, but it just takes a little bit longer because you need to leave them to dry a little bit. So yeah, I think with acrylics it's actually better to kind of just do this kind of texture. Just use the advantage, use them to get all the advantages that you really want. I think the more texture you can get on your miniatures, the more interesting they appear, and then the less worry and concern you'll have with them just kind of looking like bland, boring toys. It starts to look like more like a painted object. So the key thing here is you can start to see where the light is really shining. The problem is that the wings look really nice. They're just they're in the wrong direction basically. Yeah, just in the wrong place. Okay, so there you saw me adding in deep orange, and that color is what's going to give our gold a little bit more warmth. Now, one thing I will say is annoying about acrylics is just how quickly they dry out on your palette. Oil paints don't really have this issue, so you just have to be a bit more patient. But here you can start to see me adding in this orange, right? And what we're doing is we're warming up our gold. The reason we're doing this is because, again, the light that we're kind of working with needs to be consistent across the model. So whether I'm painting the blue, whether I'm painting the gold or the skin, there needs to be a consistent color across the model, and that's why we've got this orangey yellow tone now coming across, and it just warms the gold up. So the sunlight again is gold, so we're just using that to warm up these areas. And I do a little glaze on the chest eagle thingamajiggy as well, because it kind of creates a little bit more saturation and interest there, and we can also use it to help separate the elements. Now, I can't actually remember at what point I realized that the highlight was wrong, but I do end up having to go back later and correct it. So I'm just going to let some footage play in the background and let you guys kind of just watch the brush strokes I'm doing, and then I'll jump back in once I've got something to mention. Right, so here you start to see me adding in just a little bit more light, and this is where we start to go with our pastels, where we start to get in more of our like lighter colors. So this is where we really start pushing that highlight onto our armor. So we've got ice yellow, or rather, sorry, pastel yellow, pastel violet, and pastel peach. And the reason we're using the violet there is also to help kind of cool things down a little bit, and it's more of an experimentation than anything, because I don't want it to be like super bright, or rather super warm. I want there to be some desaturation, and using a colder color can help with that. So what I call this is like a color sandwich. I've mentioned it a little bit before if you've seen me in my live streams, but you can see how the kind of the lights, it really starts to make a difference quite quickly, just adding in that colder light. Now the cool thing again is just by doing that we start to, it's funny, isn't it, because it's like all the previous way we had highlighted, the previous way we had done the values are now kind of gone, because we've now added in these other areas, these are brighter values. So it kind of just means that like you still have those other colors there, they're just slightly different now, and it's just kind of back and forth. Like I do end up making a couple of mistakes where I kind of completely paint over all the other stuff I had done, and I kind of have to go back in with warmth to bring it back. And this is the kind of back and forth element that is like really required for painting in this way, because if we don't do this, if we kind of just rely on our first input, then we're going to end up getting like a slightly kind of boring style of painting. It's actually interesting to kind of have that back and forth as you're learning and as you're trying different things. Okay, so now I start going in with the edge highlights, and this is a bit awkward to film, so sorry if it does look a bit weird. You can see that I've actually kind of gone in with a previous glaze over, and this must be actually where I start to correct the highlight there, which was a bit of a shame because it was really nice originally, but it was just wrong, so can't have that. Yeah, you can start to see where I'm starting to kind of edge highlight the wings here, just to get them kind of defined. And this is a ridiculous thing. I think it's actually really good that on the last stand, the characters I've chosen, I've actually removed the calligraphy on their chest, and the captain actually has most of his covered by the kind of red rope thingamajiggy that he's got on, so I don't have to worry about this. But it is annoying. It's tricky. You just have to have a very thin brush if you're going to be trying to get into all of these edges. And yes, apologies, it does make it a bit tricky to film and to get these elements in. The key thing is to have definition. So for this, you do need to go back in and underline everything again, and then highlight everything again. So yes, it takes some time. It does take some time to practice. Obviously, I'm doing this for a tutorial to get it out to you guys, but there is absolutely no rush. Take your time, enjoy this part of the process. The edge highlighting is actually quite fun, because it's where stuff starts to finally come together. I don't think it will really look metallic until you get your edge highlights in. Okay, so here you can kind of see how these things are coming in and the difference they're making. So yeah, just there, and on the edges again. Now the kind of inside of the trim is quite boring at the moment. I will have to kind of go back in there and just add a little bit more detail to make that a bit more, excuse me, to make that a little bit more interesting. As it is, it's not very good. So but for this, you can completely do that area out of rebounds, so you don't have to do huge amounts of light. All of that can be just rebound lights just bouncing off and off the kind of reflections of the model itself into the shadows, and that can be warm, because the reflections from the light are going to be warm, and then it will bounce back and be warm again, but slightly colder than what we've seen that's actually receiving most of the light. But okay guys, that's pretty much it. That is pretty much the gold elements. Obviously I did a few things off screen, but this should be more than enough to kind of give you guys a head start of how to kind of paint the more tricky parts. There's obviously his backpack that I did, and I'll be doing that in a much later tutorial. It won't be a part of this series. It will be like how to refine or how to prepare for a painting competition kind of series, where I kind of go over improving models and stuff. So yeah, but hopefully this should be like more than enough to kind of get you guys started, and hopefully you found this useful. So in the next tutorial, we'll be doing the skin. We'll be looking at Metaurus' skin and how to kind of do this element in a interesting way. It's probably one of the best faces I've painted, so I'm looking forward to sharing that with you guys. And you can kind of continue with the gold before I finish up with the gold as much as you want, just continually adding in lights, adding in lines. What's the important thing is that you leave spaces of shadow, and that the highlights that you create are very tight and very small, and that's what creates something to look metallic. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for making it all the way to the end of this point, and I will see you next time in another video where we'll be looking at the rest of his skin.